The earliest white man's settlement in these parts probably wasn't where you'd think it is. It's not on the bluff of the Trinity, where John Neely Bryan threw up a rude shelter at a place he soon called Dallas, nor is it upstream, where General William Worth established Camp Worth, later Fort Worth. Instead, it was here, midway between Dallas and Fort Worth. This is where a volunteer company of Rangers, led by Jonathan Byrd, built Byrd's Fort in the fall of 1841. In an area noted for a lack of interesting history, Byrd's Fort is replete with fascinating pioneer details. Although the state officially recognized the site in 1936 with a historical marker, today Byrd's Fort is a forgotten place. The urbanization that spread all around somehow passed it by. The area remains almost as rustic as it appeared to the early Texans. The figure of Sam Houston looms large in the fort's history. As the re-elected president of the Republic of Texas, he had vowed to establish peace with the Indians. Thus, he initiated the construction of 8 forts in the northern part of the Republic with the hope of instituting a friendly trade. Byrd's Fort was one of the posts. Thus, Jonathan Byrd organized his company of volunteers in Bowie County and came to the Trinity. They constructed a blockhouse, several dwellings, and a stockade big enough to enclose the blockhouse and 3 of the houses. In 1843, Texas signed an important Indian treaty at Byrd's Fort, the conclusion to a grand council held there with 9 tribes. President Houston himself came, but when the Indian tribes were late, he returned to the capital at Washington on the Brazos and left his commissioners to negotiate. The Indian chieftains who placed their X's on the document agreed to a number of proposals ensuring peace, but conspicuously missing from the signatories were the Comanches, the longtime nemesis of the settlers. That same year saw the Snively expedition conclude its activities at Byrd's Fort. The Snively expedition had been an attempt by Texans to retaliate against Mexican incursions by striking the Santa Fe Trail trade and gaining booty, but the ambitious effort failed, and the Texan adventurers retreated to Byrd's Fort before disbanding. Now the area is used, just as it was in the old days, by people who handle guns. The Arlington Sportsman's Club has leased the area from its Dallas owner, and the members gather there for skeet and trap shooting. One of the club's members, Mrs. Ozella Harper of Arlington, has taken a special interest in the fort's history, and I talked with her about old Byrd's Fort. Mrs. Harper, you think the fort was located approximately right here at this spot?
Yes, from the articles I have read, I believe it was located right here. Now, other people have found other places they thought that it was, but I believe that they missed seeing this big lake off down here that you can't see for the trees.
And the lake is mentioned as an identifying landmark for the site of the fort.
There are 2 other lakes, but they're smaller. One of them could have been dug later. There was one man said that he was out here and saw the site of the old blockhouse, which is where the swimming pool is right here. And that the Sportsman's Club built it right over where he had seen the trenches and signs of the old blockhouse.
I see. And of course, in 1936, when they made historical markers such as this one, they decided evidently that the fort was right at this
I believe they did.
Too.
Last summer, a girl from TCU wanted me to bring her out here and let her map the area and see what she could find. Dr. Myers at Arlington State College had asked her to do a paper on the old fort. They're trying to get it into the park system, designated, you know, on the maps and such, I think is what they're trying to do. And they seem to think the old fort was right down in here, and maybe this old pecan tree here was in the center of the fort.
Center of the stockade.
The stockade.
The stockade around the fort itself. And the spring, what you mentioned a while ago, you still get water from the, only it's a well now.
It's a well. We have to have a pump on it now to bring the water up after they drilled another well, see, into the same stream of water. And it's delicious water. It is really good. I think this might be where the people were buried that the man talked about that visited here in 1866. He said up through the woods, about 250, 300 yards to a large grove of trees. And there are some enormous trees here. So
It would have been a relatively high spot because there's a bluff right here by the creek, and a pleasant spot to put grave sites in there.
I think so.
There's an interesting story about one of those persons who would be buried right in this area, I suppose. Hamp Ratton was one of the settlers here at Bird's Fort. And they sent off for some supplies from up around the Red River, and the supply wagon was late in coming, so Ratton and two others went out to look for it. And they were near Carrollton, and Hamp Ratton was cutting down a tree on Christmas Day to get some honey. And Indians came and they killed Hamp Ratton at that time. The other two escaped, came back to the fort. And this was on Christmas Day. It was in the dead of winter, 6 inches of snow on the ground. 5 days later, they felt it was safe enough to go back and retrieve his body. And they found there his dog still faithfully guarding the body of Ratton. So they returned the body here and buried it. And the settlers, this demoralized them somewhat, according to the early histories. And John Neely Bryan was settled on the Trinity River then, and he came here and visited the settlers and persuaded two of the families, the Beamans and the Gilberts, to return to Dallas with him at the site of what is now Dallas.